Don't touch that. The words came out of my mouth before I'd even fully stepped back into the office. My manager's hand froze inside my desk drawer. Her phone was already in the other hand, camera pointed down, red light on. HR stood to her left, clipboard tucked to her chest like armor. Two coworkers hovered close enough to hear everything, far enough to pretend they weren't listening. Routine inspection, she said without looking up. I glanced at the open drawer. Not the messy one, not the top. The back compartment, the one you only open when you think you know what you're looking for. I set my coffee down slowly. The room went quiet in that way offices do when something crosses a line and nobody wants to be the first to acknowledge it. My name is Marlo Quinn. I am 42 years old. The thought ran through me, not as an introduction, but as a grounding point. The way you remind yourself of your footing before a fall you didn't cause. HR cleared her throat. We just need to verify a few things. Verify what? I asked. Eyes still on the phone. Not them. My manager finally looked up. Company property. The word hung there, waiting to be challenged. HR reached deeper into the drawer and pulled out the black USB drive. She held it up, careful, like it might bite. One of the coworkers sucked in a breath and immediately pretended to cough. This wasn't listed. HR said, "No," I answered. It wasn't meant to be. The phone tilted slightly, trying to keep me in frame. I leaned forward until the lens caught my face clearly. Calm, steady. I let the silence stretch, then asked, "Find anything?" The red light vanished. HR's grip tightened on the drive. My manager's smile didn't quite come back. One of the coworkers backed away, bumping into a chair. Nobody spoke. Nobody met my eyes. For clarity, this story is a work created by the writing team at Revenge AITA. I picked up my coffee again and took a slow sip, 15 minutes away from my desk. And they'd already shown me exactly how far they were willing to go. If they were this comfortable crossing the line with witnesses watching, what did they think they could get away with once the door was closed? HR sealed the black drive inside a clear bag and held it up between us. Like the room needed proof that something had been found. This wasn't documented, she said. Eyes flicking to my manager. My manager didn't hesitate. That's because it's restricted. A few desks down, someone whispered my name. Another voice followed. Softer. Sharper. I kept my hands on the edge of the desk and watched the bag crinkle as HR turned it over, checking the label like it might change if she looked long enough. "Is this the key?" she asked. Not to me. My manager's mouth tightened. It would explain a lot. I felt the pull then. Not fear. Confirmation. Greed always shows up early and loud. I leaned back just enough to let them keep talking. "Access logs don't match," HR said. "If this is what I think it is, we need to escalate." "Careful," my manager replied. "We don't want to tip her off." That earned a glance in my direction. Not confident. Measuring. I met it and didn't blink. "What exactly do you think it opens?" I asked. The question landed badly. HR looked down at the bag again. My manager shifted her weight, blocking the drawer with her leg, like the desk might betray her. "Company systems," she said. "Sensitive ones." I nodded once. Slow. Weeks ago, I had slid that drive into the back compartment knowing exactly who would go looking and why. The real key was never something you could lose in a drawer. It lived where only procedure could reach it. Not fingers. HR tucked the bag under her arm. "We'll need a statement." "From me," I said. "From everyone," she replied. The whispers grew teeth. Someone laughed too quickly and stopped. My manager's phone stayed dark now. Face down. Like it didn't want to see what came next. If that USB wasn't the real key, what did they think they'd unlocked by taking it? HR gestured toward the conference room. My manager didn't look back at the desks. She looked at me, waiting for something to crack. Nothing did. I picked up my coffee and followed, already counting the steps it would take for this to turn from suspicion into something they couldn't walk away from. HR didn't bother with small talk in the conference room. A thin folder hit the table and slid until it brushed my wrist. This started with an internal report. My manager leaned back, arms crossed, watching my face instead of the paper. Anonymous. HR added, submitted last Friday. I opened the folder. The phrasing jumped out before the accusation did. A sentence about access windows. A casual misuse of a term I'd corrected once. Quietly. Over coffee. My stomach tightened. You recognize it, my manager said. I recognize the language. HR's pen tapped once. It was detailed. Too detailed for someone guessing. I let my eyes drift to the glass wall. Outside, desks pretended not to listen. Inside, the trap hummed. Who wrote it? I asked. We don't disclose sources. My manager smiled like that settled things. But it aligns with concerns we've had. I closed the folder. Weeks ago, I'd let one person believe a version of my work that wasn't true. A harmless shortcut. A fake dependency. I'd watch the hunger behind the nodding. I needed someone desperate enough to turn curiosity into confession. HR cleared her throat. The report mentions a removable key, because I mentioned one. I said, the pen stopped tapping. My manager's smile thinned. You told people you needed it, she said. I told one person. Silence leaned in. HR flipped a page and didn't look up. The source claimed urgency. Risk, a chance to protect the company. Protect. The word always arrives dressed like virtue. I folded my hands, steadying them on the edge of the table. If feeding the wrong truth pulled a report out of hiding, who was really being tested? My manager pushed back her chair. This explains the desk search. No, I said. It explains the timing. HR gathered the folder. We're expanding the review. Well, of course you are. The chair legs scraped. My manager stood, blocking the door without meaning to, then didn't move. We'll need you available, she said. I'm right here. HR glanced at the clock. For now, the word landed heavy. As they stepped out, my phone buzzed once in my pocket, a message I didn't open. Pressure was shifting. I could feel it looking for a place to break. The meeting invite hit everyone's calendar at the same time. Mandatory. No agenda. The room filled fast, chairs scraping, people standing along the walls like they'd been pulled in by gravity instead of curiosity. My manager took the front without ceremony. This is about transparency, she began, eyes sweeping the room and landing on me for half a beat too long, about protecting the company from unnecessary risk. A few heads turned. No one asked which risk. We've identified patterns, she continued. Unusual access, informal controls, situations where one person holds too much. Too much what? She didn't say it. She didn't have to. I felt the heat crawl up my neck and forced myself to stay still. The worst part wasn't the accusation. It was how carefully she avoided my name. HR shifted beside her. Papers pressed flat against her chest. This is an internal review, she added. No conclusions have been drawn. Drawn. Like a line you pretend isn't already there. I waited. Let the silence stretch just long enough to make the room uneasy. Then I stood. Before this goes any further, I said, voice steady, can you confirm who authorized access to my workspace and my personal storage? The words landed wrong. Conversations died mid-breath. Someone dropped a pen. My manager's mouth opened, then closed. That's not relevant to this discussion. She said, it's directly relevant. I replied, if we're talking about integrity. HR's gaze dropped to the table. The papers in her hands crinkled. My manager stepped forward. Smile tight. We're addressing systemic concerns by bypassing procedure, I said, and documenting it. Her eyes flicked to HR. HR didn't look up. If asking who crossed the line made them this uncomfortable, what did that say about the line itself? We'll take this offline. My manager snapped. This isn't the forum. It became one when you invited the department. The room stayed quiet. No one moved. My manager nodded once. Sharp. Meeting adjourned. Chairs scraped again. People filed out without looking at me. HR lingered, then followed, leaving the papers behind on the table. I didn't sit down. I didn't chase them. I watched the door close and felt the shift settle in my chest. They had wanted silence. I had given them a record. HR closed the door and slid a document across the table until it stopped just short of my coffee. Temporary access transition, she said. The title faced me. Clean and harmless. My manager stayed standing. Too close. Close enough to make the room feel smaller. This keeps things moving. She added, no disruption. I scanned the first page. The language was soft, provisional, cooperative. By the second page, the weight shifted. Responsibility pooled in places it didn't belong. Future failures. Unforeseen gaps. A quiet transfer of blame. HR tapped the signature line with one finger. This protects everyone. The cup was warm in my hand. I felt a slight vibration settle as I set it down. The base meeting the table just right. I didn't look at it again. Everyone, I repeated. My manager leaned in. You don't want this turning into something bigger. I looked up. It already has. HR exhaled through her nose. If you refuse, it raises questions. Questions you already wrote. I said, the room pressed closer. The clock on the wall ticked loud enough to count. I could hear my own breathing and the faint scrape of my manager's shoe against the carpet as she shifted her weight. What would you do if the only way to look innocent was to accept guilt in advance? I slid the document back untouched. I'm not signing. The word landed flat. Final. My manager's jaw tightened. Think carefully. I am... HR gathered the pages too quickly, edges bending under her grip. We'll note your decision. Please do. Silence stretched. My manager straightened. Authority back in place like a jacket she'd been waiting to put on. Then we move forward without your cooperation. I picked up my coffee. Steady, unbothered. You already decided that. The door opened. A badge reader chirped outside, sharp and impatient. HR stepped aside. Clearing the path, I stood, chair legs scraping once. The pressure didn't lift. It shifted. And this time, it followed me out. Security showed up faster than I expected. One stayed close to my shoulder. The other held out his hand. Badge. I slipped it free and placed it in his palm. The chirp at the door went dead when he tested it. Laptop, my manager said from behind me. Close enough that I could hear her breathing. I handed it over. She didn't thank me. She didn't look at me. Authority likes clean endings. HR stood near the wall, arms folded tight. Administrative leave, she offered. Effective immediately. For how long? That depends. Depends always means never in their language. I adjusted the strap on my bag and stepped toward the exit. The second guard moved first, opening the door like he was trying to be polite about it. Outside, the cold hit hard. Snow cut sideways across the entryway. Loud against the glass. I stopped just long enough to check my watch. The time blinked back at me. Steady. My manager's voice followed me out. You'll be contacted. I know. She hesitated. You didn't have to make this difficult. I turned. You didn't have to make it illegal. Her mouth tightened. HR looked down. The guard shifted. Uncomfortable. Like he'd been dropped into a conversation he didn't want. I took 2 steps into the snow and felt the calm settle in. The system didn't care about titles or meetings or who walked who out. It cared about verification. Every cycle needed a manual check. Not a script. Not a backup. A person. What would happen when the window closed and the validation didn't come behind me? The door shut. The lock slid home. I kept walking. Counting without counting. Already past the point where any of them could fix what they'd just set in motion. My phone started vibrating before I reached the end of the block. I let it buzz. Then again. Then a third time. Longer. When I finally answered, the voice on the other end skipped the greeting. We can't post today's close. I pictured the finance floor without needing to see it. What do you mean? Can't. The ledger won't unlock. Another voice cut in. Closer to the receiver. We're seeing red across compliance. I stopped walking. Did you try the override? A pause. Papers rustled. Someone swore under their breath. All of them. That's not possible, the first voice said. It has to be an IT issue. It isn't. I said, silence. Then sharper. Are you saying this is because of you? I'm saying it's because of what you did. A new call pushed through. I declined it. Then another. Then a message. All caps. No punctuation. Call me now. I leaned against the cold brick and listened as panic found a rhythm. Audit is stalled. Someone said in my ear. The pipeline just stopped. Restart it. We did. Then escalate. We did that too. They kept trying to muscle their way through a system that only ever listened to procedure. Titles bounced off it. Authority slid right off. The logic didn't bend. It waited. How do you explain a collapse when the only fix is admitting you crossed a line you swore you never would? Another call. This one's steadier. Legal wants to talk. About what? About access. I smiled. Just a little. They should. The line went quiet. Then, softer. They're asking who approved the search. Tell them the truth. They want you on the call. I'm available. The call ended. No goodbye. No relief. Just the sound of a building realizing it had locked itself out and thrown away the key. The call dropped me into the room without ceremony. A grid of faces. Legal at the center. My manager off to the side. Arms crossed too tight. HR stared at the table like it might open and swallow her. We need a simple answer. Legal said, who authorized the desk search? No one spoke. My manager shifted. It was a routine authorized. Legal repeated. Slower. Silence thickened. HR's pen hovered. Useless. I watched the timer on my phone tick down the last few seconds. No one noticed. They were too busy waiting for someone else to fall on the blade. The email sent itself. Phones buzzed across the grid. A blink. Another. Legal glanced down, then back up, face changing as files opened. A folder appeared on the shared screen without my name on it. Illegal workplace search. Legal read. Documented. My manager's jaw slackened. Coercion during a disciplinary meeting? Legal continued. A pause. Audio verified. HR's chair scraped back. That recording wasn't disclosed. It didn't need to be. Legal replied, it's admissible. Another page slid into view. Timestamps, access logs, a trail that didn't wobble. This is obstruction. Legal said, clear and repeated. My manager found her voice. She planned this. I leaned closer to the camera. I documented it. Legal looked at me for the first time. You're confirming cooperation. Yes. HR swallowed. With who? Federal oversight? The room recoiled. My manager shook her head once. Sharp and useless. What's the most dangerous thing you can do during a federal inquiry if not create the evidence yourself? Legal closed the file. The search triggered our escalation threshold. Phones kept buzzing. Someone muted themselves too late. The sound of breathing carried. Legal's gaze moved across the grid, then settled back on me. Do not contact her outside counsel. I ended the call before anyone could answer. The pressure didn't lift. It shifted forward, toward consequences that no longer needed my input to arrive. They didn't invite me back to the building. They sent a link instead. Legal filled the screen. Outside counsel sat just off to the side. Close enough to interrupt. My manager wasn't there. HR wasn't either. That absence did more than any apology could have. We're here to resolve. Legal opened. No preamble. No warmth. Resolve what? I asked, keeping my voice level. Exposure. Counsel replied, and separation. A document appeared. Then another. Language tightened. Names vanished. Responsibilities reassigned to phrases that didn't breathe. I read until the numbers showed up. Spelled out. Heavy. Final. Compensation. Coverage. Non-disparagement pointed in only one direction. This ends your employment. Legal said. It already did. A beat. Counsel leaned forward. The individuals involved will be restricted from regulated financial roles. Permanently. I waited for the qualifier that never came. There will be no announcement. Legal added, no statement. Of course not. Counsel shifted. This protects everyone. Everyone who crossed the line. I said, and everyone who watched. Silence. Papers shuffled. Someone typed notes that didn't matter anymore. What does accountability look like when lawyers stop arguing? Legal closed the file. We need confirmation. I scrolled to the end. The signature line waited. This time, it didn't ask me to carry anyone else's weight. I signed. Effective immediately. Counsel said, relieved. Effective, like I corrected. Period. The call ended without ceremony. No thank you. No regret. Just a clean cut. and a quiet agreement to pretend this had always been the plan. My phone buzzed once after, a message from an unfamiliar number. We need to discuss transition access. I set the phone down and didn't respond. Consequences had started moving without me. The next pressure point was already forming. And this time, it wasn't on paper. The last call came through as I was packing the final box. Legal spoke first, calm, measured. Systems are stabilized. Oversight is active. Good, I said. There will be no further contact unless requested through counsel. That works. A pause. Someone else joined the line. Voice careful. We appreciate your cooperation. I didn't answer that. I didn't need to. The line went quiet. Then ended outside. The snow had started again. Thick enough to slow everything down. I carried the box to the trunk and set it in place, feeling the weight leave my hands. The building behind me stayed tall and sealed, lights on. Work continuing under rules they hadn't written. They thought I was trapped with them. They didn't realize they were trapped with what I'd already sent. My phone buzzed once more. A message from an unfamiliar number asking about access windows and transition support. I read it, locked the screen, and put the phone face down. The work no longer belonged to me, and I no longer belonged to the place that tried to take it by force. I learned something simple through all of this. When people cross a boundary and expect silence, the most powerful response is not anger or explanation. It is documentation, patience, and the refusal to carry responsibility that was never yours. I drove away without looking back. Thank you for staying with me through this. If any part of it felt familiar, or if you've ever had to choose between keeping the peace and keeping your dignity, I'd like to hear your thoughts in the comments. I'll be sharing more stories like this, the quiet kind where decisions matter more than volume. If you want to keep going with me, follow along.